When you want to start recording.
Great, you're good to go.
Yeah. Hello and welcome, colleagues, and thanks for your time today. Here we are to learn more about asset management, and I'm very happy to have contributed to this UNDESA UNCDF joint effort to go beyond our traditional approach to capital investment and investment in new infrastructure, and more towards maintaining and taking care of the infrastructure we have. Of course, asset management goes beyond this maintenance of infrastructure, and I've been very happy to contribute to this effort. I'm Diana Lopez, by the way. I think you all know me from my many emails. I'm a partnership specialist in cities and urbanization. And from UNDP, when we saw this material that we have contributed with case studies and some approach to governance and our expertise, especially with local governments, but also with central governments, we thought this material was very good opportunity for our country offices, for UNDP colleagues that you are outside there, supporting governments to deal with the sometimes complicated issue of asset management. So we thought this is a good opportunity for you to know this material, because now it's done, it has to go out, and what better than you colleagues at UNDP that are out there. So with that, I hope that you enjoy this session. More possibilities for support are available from UNDESA if you want to expand this knowledge to your partners, and I'm sure our colleagues are going to tell you more about this series of capacity building, training and solutions sessions on managing asset management. So with this, I leave you with Claire Chan, who is our colleague at UNDESA in Financing for Development. To you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Diana. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all here today. Thanks for joining. My name is Claire Chan, and I'm with the Financing for Sustainable Development Office as a consultant. And I will now turn the floor to Ms. Caroline Lombardo, who is the Chief of the International Tax and Development Cooperation Branch at Financing for Sustainable Development Office at UNDESA.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you, Claire. It's nice to see everyone this morning. And, you know, just looking at the range of participants we have here from UNDP country offices across the globe, this really speaks to the cross-cutting, multidisciplinary nature of this topic. Lack of proper infrastructure planning is really costly. It hurts efforts for the pandemic recovery, it hurts climate action, it hurts our efforts to achieve the SDGs. This is the key message of our new publication, Managing Infrastructure Assets for Sustainable Development. UNDESA, UNCDF have jointly issued this publication, and it really shows local and regional governments how to use long-term infrastructure planning to save money, to increase efficiency, and to promote sustainability. So the handbook, as Diana is mentioning, it draws on real-world experiences of local governments in using UN asset management tools and a wide range of expertise from across the world. And Diana played a pivotal role in helping us tap into the very rich experiences you all have working at the national and local levels. The book is a call to action. It calls governments to vastly overhaul the way we build and maintain infrastructure. And we're talking about everything here from water and sanitation systems to energy grids, transportation facilities, all this to reduce waste and cost and ensure a sustainable future. So I have 4 quick messages for you. First, infrastructure, public infrastructure plays a huge role in implementing 2030 agenda. Over 90% of SDG targets directly depend on different types of infrastructure investments, roads, buildings, water and sanitation facilities. Second, we see across the world that poorly maintained assets are impeding SDG progress. And we know there are lots of reasons for this, but there's a strong focus on the new, while old assets go neglected and new ones are still built without a proper asset management framework in place. This oversight is really costly. In some cases, it's cost developing countries up to 2% of their GDP. And we know how disastrous it can be when under-maintained assets fail. These vulnerabilities are really clear in times of crisis, like the current times. So third, governments need to strengthen the resilience and sustainability of these infrastructure assets that are so connected to our daily lives. We see this as a fundamental part of long-term public investment policy and strategy. And this is part of our the wider basket of work on integrated national financing frameworks for the SDGs. So forth to the handbook. This provides local and national governments with really practical tools. It's meant to be very accessible. It gives guidance on how do we adapt these tools to our current social and economic environmental challenges. The entry point is some really basic key questions. What assets do people need? How can the assets last longer and perform better? How can their potential to save or generate revenue be maximized so we can unlock resources for other community needs now and into the future? So the handbook equips policymakers and practitioners to find the answers to those basic questions in their very specific national and local contexts. The big case it makes is that asset management is a way to align strategic planning with infrastructure and public service delivery in the real world. As Diana mentioned, we convene now with partners some online solution dialogues in regions that are focusing on asset management basics, on data, on crisis resilience. We're also working to reach much wider field, the massive open online course we partner with UNITAR in Colombia, which is going to give local and central authorities an opportunity for free certified comprehensive self-paced training in these asset management tools. We really see this handbook as a go-to resource, and we're very excited to partner up with you to see how we can make better use of it in the field. You're going to hear more about this today. My main message to you right now is thank you so much. Back to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And I would also like to mention that Caroline is one of the editors of the handbook, and she has been a very supportive and great champion of our work on infrastructure asset management. So thank you again. I will now give the floor to Jaffer Machano, if he is here. He is the Global Program Manager for Municipal Investment Finance at the UN Capital Development Fund. Over to you, Jaffer.
Claire, sorry, I'm joining from a phone connection and not on my computer. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know colleagues are joining from all over the world. So from our perspective, we have partnered with UNDESA. This is the second topic that we have really dig deep and able to provide detailed support to partners who are able to manage. So asset management, especially to me and our program on municipal investment and local government, it's paramount because we are seeing a lot of local governments, especially, even some national governments, but a lot of local governments have a lot of assets, but they're not on their books. And then when investors or other service providers, they interact with them, they look financially weak from the perspective of getting an opportunity of financing and advancing their expansion of infrastructure. But actually, it's because most of the time, the assets are not financially managed properly, from valuation to maintenance and all the way to the end cycle of the assets. So I'm really happy that Diana has taken this initiative to roll this tool out as a handbook to the rest of the country offices. Us as UNCDF, we remain ready to support on the ground should there be any interest to further take this into practice, whether at the local government or a national government. And I really want to thank UNDESA, both at the technical level and at the management level, to be a really good partner again for producing really good quality work. Thank you, Chen. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jaffer, and it's been a real pleasure to work with you, not only in rolling out the handbook that was released about almost 3 weeks ago, but also in having UNCDF's really invaluable support with with mobilizing participants for our workshops, which we'll get to towards the end of this briefing. So awesome. We'll go ahead and start with the 3 presentations that we have today, beginning with an introduction to infrastructure asset management and the field tested tools that have been developed out of the pilot project. And this will be presented by Linda Newton, who is an asset management consultant with UNDESA. She is one of the authors of the new handbook, and she specifically was the lead author on chapters 1 through 4, as well as Annex A of the handbook. So over to you, Linda, for your presentation.
There we go. I have to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Claire, and welcome everybody. I'm working off 2 screens here, so I'm hoping you're seeing the proper screen. Good. Always good to check. So it's been a pleasure for me to be able to work on this manual and really work with the project from the start. I've spent all my life in this field of asset management, so in many ways it's a culmination of everything I've been doing my entire career. So what have we been doing? Let's get started. My aim this morning in the next 15 minutes or so is to introduce you to asset management and the tools that we've developed to support our local communities in this endeavor. So I'll very briefly touch on what the basics are. I quite often find when we go into the field that people don't have a common understanding what asset management is, and it's typically finance focused, and that's it. So we just want to make sure we're all on the same level, and that will help inform you when we talk about the diagnostic tool and the action plan. So why assets, and why should we care about them? So here's a question to you, and you can type into the chat. Why do we have the assets that we have? Why are they there? And should we even care that we have them? And I'll give a moment for everybody to think, but some of the basic reasons are that they're there to meet community needs and expectations. Assets deliver a level of service to our communities, whether it's at the local level or whether it's at a national level. And so they will meet strategies, they will meet plans, they will support development at whatever level and whatever organization owns those assets. So why should we care about them? Well, assets cost a lot of money. They are very valuable, both in terms of the service they deliver and in terms of what they cost to put in place and operate and maintain over their life cycle. And as you can see here, we have 4 phases through the life cycle of an asset. It's not just acquiring them, planning to get them and getting them, but it's operating and maintaining them over that period. And that operation and maintenance, as a couple of our speakers have alluded to, is an incredible amount of money. An asset can last anywhere from 5 years to 100 years or more when we think about some of our historical assets. And so those use costs could be anywhere from 60 to 80% of the overall cost of the asset. So we need to think about that, and we need to be aware of what those costs are. And we need to think about how do we look after that asset from the day we decide we want to have it until the day we get rid of it. It's very similar to what you would do with your own vehicle, with a car. And we don't just buy a car and forget about it. We have to maintain it. We have to change the oil, rotate the tires. And so assets in many ways are taking what we do with a car for asset management and doing that for other things that we do. So what is asset management then? The technical definition, if you like, is that coordinated series of activities that monitor and maintain things of value. And we've already ascertained that assets have a value, both in terms of service value and a financial value. But if I could put it into 4 sort of succinct phrases, it would be the right assets in the right place at the right time, and equally importantly, managed by the right people. And it's not just one asset, it's a portfolio of assets. So we have many assets. As you can see in front of you, we could have a landfill. It could be road infrastructure, street lighting, water, wastewater, electrical distribution networks. So how do we decide what gets the right amount of money? So what we have to do is we take a portfolio approach where we look at balancing the levels of maintenance, the levels of service, the funding across all of these assets. So we need to look at the risks involved. What happens if we don't maintain something over something else? And that in a nutshell is what we talk about. So we've looked at the why, we've looked at the what, how do we do this? It starts at the national level. It starts with national legislation, national policies that entrench that direction to look after assets to local governments. We have national land acts, we have national electricity acts, or perhaps water acts. And these all provide guidance and structure to our local governments. Our local governments may have their own policies and strategies and development plans. So all of these together, as you can see from our blue arrow, help us create what we call an asset management framework. Think of the framework as the skeleton. It's those bones that help us get moving, and then gradually put muscles on the skeleton so that we can go in the direction we want to go. And within that framework, we have our own asset management policy that tells us why we're managing the assets within our local government, what we're managing, and to some extent, how we're going to manage them. What principles are we going to follow? And then we have these three pillars. We need to understand what our demand is. We need to understand what the life cycle of those assets is. Again, we've talked about those 4 phases. And then we need to understand what can we afford to pay for. When we have this, we are then able to operate our assets through that use period. And we're supported by asset management information systems. They can be very simple as registers in a book, or they can be quite complicated. So all of these things together are how we manage our assets and what enable us to manage those assets. So this is what we showed to our local governments. And from that, we developed tools to help them better manage their assets. And I'm going to talk about 2 of those tools now. The first tool we're going to look at is the diagnostic tool. So our tools were aimed at first understanding the problem, which is the diagnostic, and then creating a plan to solve the problem. And that's the asset management action plan. So let's look at the diagnostic tool first. So it's got several objectives, and the idea behind the tool is it serves as a means to assess awareness of asset management. We didn't want to call it a maturity model, and when you see the structure, that's what it may look like to you. But the aim was to use it as a teaching tool as well, to develop that awareness with our local municipalities, help them develop actions on how to move forward. And then from the recommendations that fall out of the diagnostic tool, that could be used as a means to develop a plan to fix something that is quite simple. So the foundation of the diagnostic tool is the ISO 55000 Asset Management Standard, as well as the International Infrastructure Management Manual. And the structure is based on the New Zealand Treasury Department's Asset Management Maturity Assessment. Now, the tool is an Excel spreadsheet, but it's also can be a Word document if you don't have access to Excel. And it comprises 3 parts, which we'll look at very briefly. The first part is a self-assessment, and these are just screenshots of the tabs on the Excel spreadsheet. But municipalities are asked to identify who they are, their population, and then they go through a series of questions where they assess themselves from what assets do you have to what are your critical assets, who's responsible, what legislation and directives guide what you do. So this first part is done right at the start when they first get the diagnostic tool. And it's to get them to think about asset management at a very, very high level. And this is typically done by senior staff within an organization. The next part is the on-site assessment, where we conduct our assessments. We had 3 or 4 people come in from UNDESA, myself being one of them. In some cases, it was our on-site consultants, our in-country consultants. And they ask a series of 14 questions, all related to those 3 pillars of asset management we saw earlier. And so here's an example of the first question. And we document the answers to those questions. Along with the questions are an explanation of what it means. So when we see the question, what asset inventory does a local government collect? Within the explanation, it would say, well, this is the type of information you should be collecting at a basic level and at an advanced level. So that helps the assessor extract the information we need from our municipalities. It also helps the municipalities or local governments understand what is a good practice. And this exists for all of the 14 questions. The next part is the evaluation. And this is done after the assessment. It's not done on the ground. The assessor goes away and assigns a score from 0.5 to 4 in line with these 4 levels of awareness, which is what we've called them. And it ranges from, we've heard the term asset management all the way to we're at the other end of the spectrum and we are a model for the world. And I can tell you that I have not encountered very many models for the world in asset management. Most people starting on their journey are between a 1 and a 2, and even those at a better level, their awareness might be a 3. So what does that evaluation look like? Again, these are screenshots from the Excel spreadsheet, but the 4 levels, so basic, elementary, progressing, and advanced, each have wording that explains what does that look like at that level. So asset inventory, it would say, what does a level 1 look like, or a 2, or a 3, or a 4? And so the assessor then takes the comments, transfers them to this screen, or this tab, assigns a score, and also assigns a score that they think the municipality could achieve, and then puts down the reasons for those scores and evidence. So it's not good enough for a local government to say, oh yes, we have an asset inventory. The assessor wants to see it. So we understand what that inventory is, and are there challenges perhaps with their inventory? And then from that, we can recommend interventions. And the idea behind the interventions is that we want to look at problems that can be solved quickly, so quick wins. And then what are more strategic actions that might take a little bit longer to follow? But ideally, any of the actions identified shouldn't take any longer than 2 to 3 years, because we want to see success fairly quickly. So to sum up the process, we identify what that assessment type is. One of the advantages of the diagnostic tool is a local government could use it as a health check. They could do it themselves if they wanted to. You don't have to have another organization come in. And again, this is that element of learning and awareness. Once it's determined which way they want to go, then the self-assessment is done. And it's very important to have a diverse team that takes part in the assessment. So it's not just the accounting or the finance department. We want developers, we want the engineers, we want the community health staff, all part of that. Because asset management isn't one asset, it's all of our assets. And then the assessment, and then the evaluation. So that's how the diagnostic tool works. Now we're going to look at how we take that information and develop an action plan to move forward, which is the second tool we developed. So the AMAP is 5 steps. And we developed 2 documents to support the asset management action plan. One is a template with pre-written text and tables that guides the local government through the whole AMAP process. And the second part is a writing guide that has concrete examples to help them with some of the more difficult concepts, such as setting performance goals. So we're very briefly going to look at these 5 steps, from establishing our policy all the way through to implementing a plan, and where the guidance from the diagnostic tool fits in. So the framework, most local governments that we have dealt with do not have an asset management framework. So what they're asked to do in the AMAP is just identify the principles that they're going to operate by. What are those ideas that are going to guide them? So here are several examples of sustainability principles or customer-focused principles. And there's example principles in the guide and in the template that they can use, or they can write their own principles. And they're encouraged to have no more than 5 to 8 and to eventually display them within their local government or within their community. So this also helps them think about what a policy framework is. And it could be that their AMAP is actually setting up that policy framework. That may be where they want to start. So this is their first step. What are your principles and how are you going to move forward? The next step asks them to look at their priorities, the stakeholders, and the goals. So what are those priority assets? Are they still what you thought they were in your diagnostic assessment? And when we look at priority assets, we're looking at those assets that if you lost them, if you could not deliver that service, what would the impact be? So if you lose your market, is that a significant amount of revenue? If you lose your hospital, so what is that priority asset? Because the objective of the AMAP is to focus on one priority asset. That we can't do everything all at once. Let's focus on one and get it right for one, and then use what we learn for our other assets. So we have to identify stakeholders. who has a high level of interest or who is actively involved in managing our assets? Do they know who those stakeholders are? Because they're the ones that will help them determine what services need to be provided. And then goals. How do we identify performance goals and targets for those assets? So it's not just good enough to say, we will deliver water to 90% of our population. How are we going to know if we've reached 90% of our population? How are we going to measure that? Are we going to measure it by service disruption? Are we going to measure it by availability of water? Are we going to measure it by reliability? Our systems are ready and available all the time. Do we measure it by how often we get out and we fix broken infrastructure and do our maintenance and repairs? So we get them to think about what those goals are and talk them through how you set proper goals and targets that you can measure. The next step, we ask them to think about their current methods and processes and tools. And so we give them examples of what you could be using and what do you use? Because one of the gaps could just be how they are, what they're using for asset management or what methods they have. And so it may be that they need to change something in what they do. And so again, this gets them thinking that it's more than just going out and fixing it. There's a whole process involved in asset management. It's systematic and it's systemic. So we want them to think about that, and the AMAP process guides them through that. Step 4 is the gap analysis, and my two favorite words, so what? Okay. Once you've discovered you have a gap, and if we think about our water, it only reaches 80% of our community and our goal is 90%. Well, so what? We need to identify then why that gap exists. And once we know why that gap exists, we can identify those actions required to fill that gap. What can we do quickly? And what can we do that's going to require a longer term intervention and perhaps more funding? And so this gap analysis takes them through that journey of getting from this is where we are to this is where we want to be, and how do we get between the two? And then the very last step, of course, is the plan. Again, focusing on what are those things that we can do quickly. If I think of garbage collection, one of our municipalities, and I'd love to use this example, because one of our local governments that we worked with in Tanzania said, our landfill is at capacity, we need to have a greater landfill, this is our priority asset. And then they started thinking, and one of their quick wins was, well, let's first look at, can we reduce the waste? Let's educate our community. So one of their quick wins was a community campaign to get people to reuse and to recycle more. And perhaps that would extend the life of the landfill. It would be less waste that's being carried to the fill. Perhaps they wouldn't need another transfer station. So this was a quick win while they're starting to think about those longer term practical actions. And then it's important to set realistic completion dates. And again, we talk about these in the AMAP and stress so much the importance of council approval and getting buy-in. It's not just about creating an AMAP. It's not about creating a strategy and putting it on a shelf. It's about doing. And you can only get things done if you have senior leadership buy-in, not just in speaking, but in doing, that it's part of the agenda at meetings and that asset management becomes entrenched in what they do. It becomes part of their culture because it's the right thing to do. And it makes sense to do it that way. So our process, again, is appointing that focal person who's going to champion the development of the AMAP, writing the AMAP, that consultation with the stakeholders in the community, revising the AMAP, and then having that approval by senior leadership, and then putting it into action. So we've looked at very briefly asset management basics, which is what chapters 1 and 2 focus on in the handbook. The diagnostic tool, which you have to do those diagnostics, understand what your problem is, and then create that plan to solve the problem. And that's what the AMAP is. And so the handbook goes from the first 4 chapters of the handbook go through this continuum so that hopefully at the end, we have those right assets in the right place at the right time. And as I've mentioned, managed by the right people. So those are the first 4 chapters of our handbook, which is we think really draw on best practices from around the world. What we want to do now is send all of you to a breakout session to get you to think about some of the concepts we've just talked about and how they work within the various countries that you support. So I'm not sure how many breakout rooms we will have, but when you do get into your room, if you can introduce yourselves, you may already know each other, but I don't know many of you. I might be in one of your breakout rooms, and discuss the following 2 questions. We're going to, I believe we allow 10 minutes in the schedule for this. Claire will confirm. But what are the main political and technical challenges bringing together stakeholders, to get those efficient practices? And also, are the national and local policies articulated in the country that you work in? And if not, what could explain those disconnections? So Claire, I'll hand it back to you to assign our folks to our breakout rooms and give any other instructions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Yes, before we enter breakout rooms, I just want to say thank you for such a clear and comprehensive presentation. Again, those, excuse me, the 2 tools that Linda mentioned, the diagnostic tool and the asset management action plans, those were developed by Linda with our national experts in the 4 pilot countries of Bangladesh, Tanzania, Nepal, and Uganda. And we'll hear more from our national experts towards the end of this briefing. But yeah, those tools were carefully developed out of through several scoping missions and needs assessments. So yeah, you're welcome to read more about those and how to put them into practice in chapters 3 and 4 of the handbook. Yeah, there are a lot of key messages that I want to highlight from your presentation, but I'll leave that up to individuals to check that out on our website and in our handbook. But yes, as Linda mentioned, we'll go ahead and put people into breakout rooms. And once you're in the breakout rooms, I'll send out another kind of notification to everyone on the questions since they're no longer on the screen. And yeah, again, thank you, Louise, for putting them in the chat if you want to have another look. Again, please introduce yourselves to each other. And yeah, this will be about 10 minutes and then we'll reconvene and before going into the second presentation.
Hi, Claire. I ended up in the same breakout room as Linda, so I was
Noticed. Okay, let
wondering
me.
yeah, actually it works. Let me see it. Join.
Can
no,
you?
I can only join breakout room 2, it looks like.
Hold on. Let me make you a co-host. I think.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have done that earlier.
All right.
Okay, now. Okay,
All right. Some reason I don't know where I am right now, if I'm in the plenary or it looks like I didn't go anywhere. Let's see.
I think you're in the plenary, but you lost Claire. I don't know where she went.
Yeah. Well, there seem to be quite a few people that stayed in the plenary. We could form our own ad hoc breakout room if anyone can hear me, but I see you, Samantha.
Yeah, hi there. I'm actually here in a support capacity, so less so on the content matter. I work on the poverty and inequality team, and I'm just here to help with technicalities. But I'd love to hear more from you, or can answer any questions you might have. But
sure. You know what? I think it's a good idea. Is anyone else listening? Can anyone else say hi? We have everyone here named, not everyone, but a lot of people named Diana Lopez. So I know that is not true. Okay, so I'm just gonna say a few words to those that stay in the plenary, and maybe encourage some discussion. So my name is Daniel Platz. I'm the lead on this project. I've been working with about 20 experts or consultants around the world, as well as some staff on this project for the last few years. The question that Linda posed is an interesting one for us in the field. And the reason for that is that we really had to figure out for a while who to talk to when we talk about asset management. And the reason for that is that no one really feels responsible for asset management. People may feel responsible for a certain type of asset. Let's say there's the water department, or the road department that has the road engineer, the sanitation engineer, right? People that manage the local public schools, things like that are pretty well assigned, but there's no dialogue going on between all these different asset managers, and there's no exchanging of experience going on in a lot of cases. And so we really looked at the village, the town, the city, and looked at the assets that we saw, and then we figured out who to talk to. So that's why this is for us really an interesting question, because it really depends on where you go. Who are the stakeholders? And sometimes, there are private stakeholders involved. Sometimes assets are managed by the national government or both. So it really depends on the city. But I'm just gonna pose that question. Maybe everyone is tuned out here in the plenary, but are there any ideas on who the pertinent or important stakeholders could be in your town or in your village, in your city, wherever you are, wherever you may be right now? Is anyone willing to take the floor? You can just ask some people to unmute, see what happens. I see here Alexander Prieto. But I don't think anyone is actually listening. So it's just me, Samantha, and you.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I wish I could provide more substance to your queries.
Let's just see what happens if I'm trying to unmute a few people to prompt them to say something, but it doesn't allow me to do that really. This is usually the case when we go into breakout rooms in our big meetings where we have up to 500 participants, that there's always a smaller group. Well, most of them go to the breakouts and are really active, but there's also some that, for whatever reason, have to run away to take care of stuff or cannot really join. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm very sorry it kicked you out of an active breakout group. Yeah, if I had host permissions, I'd fix that for you. My apologies.
Yeah, I should be. I'm a co-host now, but for some reason, when I want to join a breakout room, it only allows me to go to breakout room 2, and that's the room where our co-instructor Linda is already. Just a little overload, but you know what? I'm just gonna join it.
Sure.
See what they're saying, because people are very silent here in the plenary. I leave you guys alone. See you later.
Best of luck to you.
So I think a majority of us are back in the main room. So I'll just go ahead and if someone, I would like to hear from a couple of you and your responses to the two questions that Linda presented for the breakout sessions. So for the first question, what are the main political and technical challenges of bringing together stakeholders of asset management towards more efficient practices? If anyone would like to raise their hand, or we're a pretty tight group, so if you just want to unmute yourselves, feel free to speak up.
Maybe Jana will speak up for our group.
Sure.
Thank you. We have very specific context. I'm Jana Harutyunyan. I'm from Armenia, and we were talking about the challenges that Armenia is currently facing. So we are in double crisis, COVID plus the war over Nagorno-Karabakh. And in that context, when the municipalities are more busy with the spontaneous arrivals and they are busy with the COVID addressing issues, they have a lot of humanitarian responses on their shoulders. I think this would be a challenging process to start talking about the asset management. So it's just a political kind of very specific situation that we're facing right now. This much. The advantages of a situation in Armenia is that the local sub-governments are more or less like they have the autonomy, they have kind of freedom to decide on different tools and how they manage their assets, movable, non-movable. And there are projects also supporting, especially like UN agencies working a lot. So there is also definitely a niche, but taking into our consideration the situation that people are busy with other things, it would be a little bit challenging. This much, thank you.
Hello, good morning. This is Leon Shama from UNDP Iraq. I believe also there is a behavioral aspect into it. Doing maintenance and taking care of the assets in general, this is not a practice, a common practice that people locally do. And just come back also to the local government aspect. I think there is also lack of information that doing assets management or assets maintenance is less expensive than reinvesting into a new assets. This financial information, citizens, local stakeholders are not aware of, and they always prefer to invest into new assets because also for local leaders, this is a nice speech, this is a nice momentum to go publicly, especially during elections and stuff like that. So this is also from a political perspective, it shows more than taking care of maintenance of an asset. Over.
Thank you, Jana, and thank you, Leon, for your responses. If we can quickly turn to the second question, are national and local policies for asset management articulated in your country? And if not, what might explain any disconnect between policies at the national and the local level?
We were talking of, policies might exist, but the practice is something different in a lot of countries. A lot of time, access to information on budget and budget management, citizens are not aware of. So citizens or constituency are not able to make local government and national government accountable on maintaining any assets. So this is another aspect. Access to information is very weak in some countries.
anyone has any comments to add to what Leon has said, or Daniel, you're also welcome to pitch in. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule, but it's nice to hear from people who are working at the local level or have very close ties with the local governments.
Yeah, I guess it would be nice to take a quick poll, but we can't really do that right now. But just to see, you know, which places actually have an asset management policy or rules or guidance or laws in place at the national or local level. But I understand the challenge, even if it's in place, right? Implementation is something different, and we will get to talk about that. Just to encourage everyone, we have one more breakout room. So this was great, but you know, just don't be shy, because also UNDESA is here to learn from you and your experience in the field.
Thank you, Daniel. All right, this is a good segue into, I think, your presentation on chapters 5 through 8 of the handbook, which covers asset management in focus. So we'll be, those chapters cover data, crisis resilience, and the enabling environment surrounding asset management. So Daniel, sorry, I forgot the introduction. You are, he is the project lead on infrastructure asset management at UNDESA and also one of the editors of the handbook. So over to you, Daniel, for your presentation.
Thank you, Claire. Let me just try to share the screen and share the right screen. Okay, here it is. I hope you can see it. Now I just want to make sure you also see it in the right format. Let me just begin with a slideshow. Okay. All right. Okay. I assume everything is clear. Again, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to learn about our activities on asset management, and hopefully also you know, share some of the pertinent experiences with us. As Claire said, I'm the lead on the infrastructure asset management capacity development activities in UNDESA, specifically in the Financing for Sustainable Development office. Caroline is my boss. She spoke earlier and also has been very supportive of this. And of course, Claire's also want to give a shout out to her for doing a great job in everything she does, including moderating this workshop. But also Claire is the third editor on the UNDESA side for the handbook. Okay, so the second half of the handbook is sort of a advanced section. We hope that people will go through the fundamentals part to get the intro into asset management, to learn about the dynamics of asset management, and then really dive into the tools that Linda spoke about. And they're very much sequential. There's the diagnostic tool. It really helps you to assess what challenges you're facing and maybe also how you can overcome them. And then to take action, there's the asset management action plan that Linda mentioned, which really allows you to focus on one priority asset and then expand it to others if you're ready. And those asset management action plans are being implemented in the project countries and many municipalities in the project countries we mentioned as we speak. They're often multi-year plans, so it's nothing that can be done very quickly. However, as you implement those plans, you really need to think about a few more things that go beyond those chapters. One is how to get the right data and information. Linda speaks about that to some degree in her chapters, but this In Focus chapter really gives you a chance to really dive into it. Then climate change. What are the challenges local governments and national governments face regarding climate change? How can they adapt to those challenges, right? Health emergencies, obviously very current chapter. We were just starting to put together the handbook when COVID hit. So the last year, we of course thought about the implications of COVID-19 on asset management and vice versa. What does asset management do to help with health emergencies, right? And then lastly, we already mentioned the enabling environment. So there's a whole chapter about how to build an enabling environment. This is not a course on those chapters, so they are too dense and too deep. Well, I shouldn't say dense because I believe they're still very accessible, but they're very detailed in their proposals and analysis. So I can only give you a little bit of a flavor what's in there, right? I would also approach these chapters as tools. Chapter 5 really gives you a step-by-step process on how to build a better asset registry that really cuts across your different assets, and that is useful to anyone that will access the database. It doesn't matter much if you have an asset registry that is only properly understood by the engineers or is only relevant to the finance treasurers or finance leaders in the government, right? So everyone comes from a different angle, but everyone has to be able to find the right information. So it walks you through a step-by-step process. The first process is a little ambitious: assemble asset management information team. We're not really talking here about hiring 5 or 6 new consultants or experts that do nothing else but collect information. It is more about, you know, talking to stakeholders and colleagues on a regular basis to collect the right data. But steps 2 to 7 are really all about what is being done, right? Of course, you all know the difference between data and information and decisions, right? So data by itself is not helpful. It has to be turned and converted into information. And how to do that in the context of an asset registry is part of the focus of this chapter. How to build the right hierarchy, right? So that you can do what we call an information roll up and an information roll down, right? So you look at something and you know exactly where that part of an asset belongs in the asset hierarchy and what it means if that part of the asset fails, needs to be replaced, loses value, whatever is happening with that asset, right? So here we walk you through in the chapter the part a sanitation system, and so it's getting a little more technical with that example, right? How does one part depend on the other? Then the idea is, of course, to look at the condition at different parameters of your data, right? So you want to know the physical condition, you want to know how it's performing, how reliable it is, what are the maintenance needs, and there are really different ways to do that. None of them are the ultimate ways, right? That always work and that are always perfect. It depends on your assets and depends on the capacity. You don't want to collect data that you won't need. Collecting data is expensive, it's resource intensive, right? And you want to make sure that you only collect the data and only the information is being gathered that you actually need in your local governments. But how do you make that assessment, whether you need it or not? That is also part of the book. And then finally, a more technical part is the different depreciation methods, right? And so if you look at climate change and its impact at the local level, does it really make sense to have a linear depreciation rate, or do we need to talk about some other type of depreciation rate, right? And depending on what method or technique you use, the value of the asset looks very different over time. And you know, these are just examples of different methods, and you can already see that it looks very different on paper, and that it really will depend on the asset. So you have to look at what asset you wanna look over time first. You have to, and then you have to look at all the different methods, right? And how they treat the asset over time. And then you come to the right conclusions, the right pairing, and you can say, okay, this type of asset, probably I should use the straight line method. The other one, sum of years, right? And so years digits, right? And there's no one answer for every asset, but we'll tell you a little bit about how to analyze the different methods and how to come to some informed decision which method to use. Also, methods require different types of information, require different types of skills to be used. So you have to take that into account as well. I'm just gonna touch very briefly upon the other few chapters that are in this in focus part, right? Chapter 6, improving climate resilience, again, can be approached as a tool. It really shows you a process for assessing your climate risks in your local government or even a national government, and guides you towards taking action or not taking any action, right? So there's always two ways you can go in this. And well, once you identified the hazard, once you do your climate impact statements, and we explain in detail what that is, you start your vulnerability assessment. And depending on how it goes, you either end right there and wait and monitor the situation, or you go to the next level of the decision-making tree. And at the end, you really take a very important decision whether you want to spend resources or not on that particular asset to make sure it adapts in the right way to climate change, and how to walk through different decisions and how to come to the right conclusions depending on the asset is much of what the chapter is dealing with here, right? And you can see the climate hazards would really start at the very beginning. It's very easy to see how climate change can impact assets, from transport, from buildings, waste, when there's flooding, when there's a drought, when there's an earthquake, right? It doesn't take much to imagine what the implication on the asset, but also on the service that depends on the asset is, right? Here's just an example of how to determine vulnerability, which is a function of exposure and adaptive capacity. So we really walk the reader through different ways of assessing these different parameters, and then come to a vulnerability assessment. And that's just one part of the longer decision making tree. Here we give an example of how to assess risk and so forth. So this is just a few examples about how we deal with climate change and its implication on asset management. And I should make the point here that all of these tools are written in a way that they can be very much used for an AMAP or for a diagnostic tool. Linda will remember that we spent a lot of time talking to each other with the authors. So we had regular meetings every week or more, where authors really were talking about their approach, their chapters, and how we can make sure that they are all complementary to each other. A very similar approach that we followed for the climate change chapter, we use for the strengthening public health emergency response and preparedness, where we again walk the reader through adapting asset management to emergencies. And we think through all of the different assets, different services, and how they can help us prepare better for a health emergency. Here are some critical questions that you should ask yourself when you write your emergency asset response. Again, all being dealt with in some detail in the chapter. There are short-term activities, there are long-term activities, similar to the AMAP that Linda mentioned. There's things you can do quickly, things that take more time. There are things that are resource intensive and others that are not resource intensive. And so when you put your action plan together, keep that in mind, right? And finally, the last chapter is about the enabling environment. Here we talk about both enabling factors at the local level and at the national level. What type of policies help asset management, right? But what is also important is to start a dialogue between local and national stakeholders. And this chapter, based on experiences in the field, really takes the reader through a possible political process that you can start with different stakeholders to arrive at a better and more conducive environment for asset management. It's probably I would say the easiest chapter, in a sense that it's not really technical. It's really more about the politics of asset management. Not the easiest to implement by any means, but perhaps the easiest to relate to and understand. So it's a good way to start the book. I'm gonna just really quickly pass through these slides. Again, these are here just to give you an idea and an impression of how the book is structured, what type of visuals you get there. And you already get the impression, I hope, that this is not a dry textbook, but something that is quite accessible. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out the right visuals, the right way of conveying information, having in mind keeping in mind the fact that local government officials are very busy. And as we heard from you, right, they don't really think much about asset management when there's a war going on, when there's disasters out there that need responding, when there are really very pressing needs happening that have them focus maybe on one particular asset, on one particular service, or politics, right? The electoral cycle. Always better to invest into the new shiny if you want to get reelected than arguing that you have to tighten the belt and put money aside for 5, 6, 7 years from now, or even earlier. That doesn't get you reelected as much. So that's why it's so important when you approach asset management to think about institutionalizing the approach, to have something at the technical level rather than political level that is then institutionalized and being used no matter who's assuming the political leadership. Similar to the first breakout session, this is the last breakout session. You should all feel comfortable with the setting now, right? Don't be shy. If you haven't introduced yourself, because I think these are randomly assigned breakout sessions, so you will most likely end up in a different group. So if these colleagues are new, please introduce yourself, and then let's think about 2 questions here that are relevant to most of the chapters, but in particular the public health chapter and the data chapter. So the first one, based on your experience, what has been the impact of exogenous shocks like natural disasters and public health emergencies on infrastructure assets? And here we should really also think about climate change causing those shocks, right? Severe weather events and so forth. How could central and local governments better prepare for these impacts in the future and think about it from an asset management perspective? How do these exogenous shock affect your assets? What can be done now to make sure we accommodate that, right? If just a very simple example, if there's a bridge to be built, maybe we think about making sure it's high enough, tall enough to handle extra flooding that may come because of severe weather events that follow the climate change trend, right? And the second question, if you were an asset manager yourself, so let's just pretend you're a road engineer or someone handling the sanitation plant, and you had to limit yourself to 5 data points. And with that, we mean things like, age of an asset, condition of an asset, value of an asset, location of an asset. There's so many data points, but if you had to limit yourself to 5, which data points would you choose and why? So I want to give it over to Claire to send you all into those breakout sessions for about 10 minutes. And I hope we'll have a lively discussion. So I'll see you in one of those breakout sessions. Thank you.
Thank you for we'll reconvene at 9:15 for a quick, if we could hear from, again, a couple participants, and then we'll go on a short 5-minute break before we go into the third and final presentation of today's webinar. So again, it would be nice to hear from a couple of people, and I think your colleagues would also be interested to hear from you, your own country experiences. So just reiterating the question about what has been the impact of exogenous shocks on your infrastructure assets, which is a very pertinent question right now. Someone would like to either raise their hand or just go ahead and unmute yourselves and speak up. And brief follow-up question is, how could central and local governments better prepare for these impacts in the future?
Claire, I was in a group with three gentlemen, I believe, and one of them was Michael. Michael, sorry for putting you on the spot, but you had a really interesting answer. If you want to share that with us, and there was also another gentleman that just was introducing himself when we got kicked out of the breakout room. So I also wanted to give that person a chance to maybe do that now.
Sure, just very briefly, from a disaster response standpoint, the importance of having multi-risk hazard mapping in a country for two reasons. One, if we know that we have a critical asset, let's say a school or a hospital, and it happens to be located in a place that's susceptible to storm surge, and we know we have climate change with rising sea levels, that asset, it's important to be able to identify that and hopefully try to move it. If the resources, which is typically the case, we don't have resources available to do those kinds of activities, the important part of that mapping is that if a disaster does occur, we prevent that asset from being reconstructed in the same hazardous location. So now it's able to be moved to another location that is not going to be nearly as susceptible. So that advanced planning makes us, allows us to be prepared for that kind of activity, because we all know during a disaster, usually we don't have the time to go through and do such a mapping action. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It seems like you took the words right out of our chapter 6 on climate, because we also talk about not only in the planning phase, making when you're planning for building infrastructure, making it flexible and adaptable, so that if there are any unforeseen hazards that occur, you can easily adapt the infrastructure to those hazards. And also when you're rebuilding infrastructure, making sure you're not building in those same risks that caused it to be inadequate to begin with. So that's very, very interesting. And there was someone else that Daniel had shouted out. If not, we can turn to just the second question briefly. If you're an asset manager and you had to limit yourself to 5 data points to monitor your assets, which data would you choose and why? If anyone managed to get to the second question. And right after this, we'll have a short 5-minute break.
Yes, Claire, I think hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Francis. Hello.
Yes, Claire, one of the issues we thought we need to look at is the value of the assets, because the more expensive, obviously, the more critical. And we also said we need to look at the cost of that asset, because cost is really very, very, very important, because it determines our affordability, and also it determines, how careful we should look at it. And another issue we looked at was the lifespan. Because obviously, if it is temporary, yes, the lesser look we need to look at. But if it is, if the lifespan is long term, then it means, I think, at different intervals we need to continue looking at it and look at its performance. Back to you.
Thank you, Francis. Very good points. And just what was mentioned in Daniel's presentation about how to do proper asset valuation and accounting for the condition of your assets and how they're performed. That's described both in the data chapter, but also very early on in the handbook in chapter 2, Linda's chapter about asset valuation. If no one else has anything to say, we will take a short break before going into our third presentation, where we'll hear from our 4 national experts, including Francis, whom you just heard from. All right, I'll go ahead and put up a timer, and hopefully I'll see everyone back in about 5 minutes. We can get going again with the last leg of this webinar. I believe I'm turning it over to Daniel to give an introduction to the next presentation, which I will put up on the screen. I think everyone should be back. Daniel, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Claire. Hope everyone can hear me okay. So this session is, I think, the most interesting one, and without minimizing Linda's contribution and my own. But now we're really hearing from experiences in the field. It's so when we say national perspectives on infrastructure asset management, it's not necessarily just about the national central government level. It's more what we mean is sort of country experiences, right, on infrastructure asset management. And we mentioned earlier that we had 4 pilot countries where we pioneered our piloted our tools on asset management. And then based on that started in about 2017. And then based on those experiences, we started writing and compiling the handbook with our experts and some additional experts we invited from outside. So just to introduce our 4 consultants here, so we actually have more consultants now as we're expanding into Latin America and the Caribbean. But in terms of really, having tested our tools in the field, we have Bidan Krishna Das, who is our senior consultant from for UNDESA in Bangladesh, and has done a lot of interesting work with municipalities and districts there, and also with the central government. Mohan Dakal, who is also, of course, our senior consultant, but a very experienced public finance management expert in Nepal, has worked with on a lot of projects with UNDP as well. Francis Biabagambi, excuse me, who is our senior consultant from Uganda, and who's very experienced because he is now again a town clerk. So he was a town clerk for a long time. I think his last city was Jinja, right? Who you may be familiar with if you've been to Uganda. It's quite close to Kampala, and a very interesting, growing, booming city. And now he's back being a town clerk. So he can really give you the experience from both perspectives, the trainer and the trainee, right? And then Siasa Zenzi, who is our senior consultant in Tanzania, who is also senior lecturer in accounting at the Dar es Salaam Business School, who holds a PhD in public finance, and actually was the one that introduced or helped introduce the asset management policy in Zanzibar, in addition to the work he's been doing for us in Tanzania. With that long, but I think deserved introduction of all our 4 consultants, I guess we'll start with Bidan, right, Claire? Okay, Bidan, please, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Bidan Krishna Das, consultant, municipal asset management, UNDESA. Back in 2019, I was assigned to assess the asset management practices of 5 pilot municipalities in Bangladesh by applying the UNDESA UNCDF diagnostic tool. Linda has already mentioned that this diagnostic tool comprises 3 parts. So to know in detail about how these pilot municipalities in Bangladesh manage physical infrastructure and real estate, such as land and buildings, I asked municipal officials and staff 14 specific questions from that part 2 of this diagnostic tool during on-site interviews. Because these 14 questions examine specific aspects of asset management, and each question provides explanation and example of best practice. So if you want to know more about these 14 questions, you can download the diagnostic tool from our website, and the link will be provided in the chat box. Now I am going to present the key findings from the assessment. I hope these findings will be very helpful for your learning. Firstly, municipal officials, what I have found, municipal officials are fully aware of the importance of asset management. But unfortunately, due to the lack of policy on integrated asset management, they are unable to manage the existing assets properly. Moreover, there is an absence of guidelines on the formulation of the advanced asset register and measuring the performance of the assets. As a result, the key information like valuation, depreciation, the remaining life of the assets are not listed in their asset register. And instead of analyzing the performance or condition of the assets, they just act when required. But in order to manage infrastructure assets effectively, maintaining an advanced asset register and measuring the performance of the assets are very important. Next is forecasting methodology is not being used to analyze the demand in any municipalities. For example, to analyze the future demand. For example, regarding solid waste management, these municipalities in Bangladesh do not have any documented projection, like how many workers, vehicles, equipment will be required for X number of citizens. As a result, they are struggling to increase the level of services, and at the same time, continuously they are failing to meet the demand of the community. Another major problem is there is insufficient funding for the maintenance of the assets. They spend a lot for acquisition, for construction, but they do not have adequate funding or budget for maintenance. As a consequence, most of the assets obsolete prematurely. I have found that all 5 municipalities have developed capital investment plans, and we were so happy that they have capital investment plans. But unfortunately, all capital investment plans are related to construction and renovation of the infrastructure assets. These do not reflect the inventory assets, life cycle costing tied to capital investment, and long-term maintenance estimation. Then, after completing the assessment, based on these findings, we help these 5 municipalities to develop their asset management action plans. In this asset management action plans, municipalities, those pilot municipalities have drafted asset management policy framework. They have identified priority assets, performance goals, and key stakeholders. They also identified their current asset management practices and methods. They also analyzed the gap, and by addressing the gap, they finally developed their action plans. Now, if you want to know more about this,
interrupt, Fidan. You've about 30 seconds before we need to move on to the next one.
Okay. Now, if you want to know more about this action plans and the implementation status, you can send us an email. The email address will be provided in the chat box. So we understand that these municipalities, they are not able to manage the infrastructure assets due to some challenges, but they have potential to overcome these challenges. They need a specific policy, they need some technical assistances, and they need to engage more key stakeholders. Then I think they can be successful in the implementation of asset management. Finally, many thanks to our UNDP colleagues for showing interest on asset management. And we are really grateful that UNDP Bangladesh helped us in translating these materials into Bangla language. And I hope that in future, UNDP will help UNDESA and UNCDF in implementing this diagnostic tool and asset management action plans in LDC countries. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bidan, for this very concise and very interesting presentation. Now over to Mohan, please. I don't know if you're unmuted, Mohan. I can neither hear you nor see you.
Yeah, hello everybody. This is Mohan Dhakal from Nepal. I am currently working as a consultant in UNDESA. Before this the assignment, I was also with UNDESA for implementing this MF and diagnostic tool. Those tools we really tested in the field. During because of the COVID and all, it was a bit hampered, but we learned a lot of lessons. As we discussed in earlier presentations by Linda, Daniel, policy level issues are there in developing countries like Nepal, and Bidan also talked about it. We have, because of the political situation, because of the changing governance system and from unitary system to the federal system, there are a lot of political influences. And when there is a political influence, there are always, lot of infrastructure developing rather than managing the old infrastructure. So that's also the case in Nepal. And we really draw attention of those pilot municipalities that we should focus on infrastructure development, but as well as we also need to focus on the management of those assets. And with our tools like this assets management action plan, they really learned, and then they started piloting a few of their assets to prepare the management action plan as well. So in piloting municipality, we really worked hard, and then they also realized that it is very important, but still we realized that there is lack of specific policies at national level as well as local level. So we have to buy in national reformers like public financial management reform, and then other kind of reforms from the national level itself, so that it will cascade to the local level, and then local government and the municipalities will also apply those policies. So that was lacking, and then we are working on it to convince the central government on policy side. Maintenance plan. We talk about maintenance plan in a lot of municipalities because Asian Development Bank, World Bank, all those big donors are helping a lot for the infrastructure development. And also when they complete the project, they talk about the maintenance plan, but that maintenance plan is not really taken care of at the local level. So when we talked about our assets management action plan, and we used our tool in the municipalities, they really liked it, and I think that's going to be a big support to the municipalities. When we advanced from a few, we had 6 municipalities in the pilot. Now one of the organizations in Nepal is going to take over similar tools for the 15 more municipalities. So in that phase, we will be testing more on these tools, and then I think it will help a lot for some of the good big municipalities. And as you know, Nepal and even Bangladesh and other least developing countries, we have a big urbanization and migration from hills and villages going on. So that is also increasing the demand for the more infrastructure. So it's a right time to talk about management as well. When our political leader and our country situation demands for more infrastructure, so it's really right time to again go with this management thing. So it's a really good help from UNDESA and UNCDF developed tools on assets management. And one of the thing, like because of the political decision and because of different kind of movements in our countries, there are a lot of changes, and we have 753 local governments. So small municipalities, rural municipalities, and also there is a need of strategic partnership among the municipalities. So when they do the partnership, then it's also a time to talk about the management plan and I mean technical aspect of the assets management. So this is our experience in the field. I'm happy to share my report when we piloted this project. Thank you very much.
Daniel, you're muted.
Thank you, Elena.
Over to you, Daniel.
Moving on to, thank you so much, Mohan. Moving on to Siasa to talk about Tanzania.
Oh, thank you very much, Daniel. And I think our story is not very much different from Nepal as part of the developing country. So, and here I was highly involved in assessing implementation of asset management action plan, AMAPs, in 6 municipalities and 1 government agency. Apart from, maybe I can say, in most cases, initially we had some challenges in terms of awareness, because majority of local government officials, we are not very much aware of how the tool is going to be used, how the tool is going to be helpful in their planning process. But as we moved on later on, I think we had a very successful story in some of the council. In terms of awareness, even some of the councils involved, they approved the asset management action plan as part of their budget. But also we had a very good buy-in from the top council officials, district executive directors and municipal executive directors. So we had a very good support from the top officials. And my take is, once you have the support from the top officials, then things will become a little bit easy, because they can actually dictate what should be done by the council officials. For example, in one of the municipalities in Tanga, I think Linda said something. In fact, they are even looking on how they can involve private sector in waste management, instead of them as councils to invest a lot in waste management, in waste collection. So they have prepared a business plan as we are speaking now, but also they have hired local consultants to look for how they can convert waste into an alternative use in terms of biogas. But generally, we have the issue of central government, because in our country we have 2-tier system. We have the central government and we have local government. And the local government is controlled by the central government in terms of the governance. So that's why we are saying maybe as a way forward, we have to maybe to engage more officials at the central government to increase their awareness. But at the same time, because they are also dictating the budget allocation to the local government. So in a way, some of the budget constraints will be somehow minimized if people at the central government, especially the Ministry of Finance, are aware of what is happening in terms of the asset management at the local level. But also, as a proposed way forward, we don't have, as a country, we don't have national asset management policy. So we are looking from the UNDESA if we'll be able to develop one. In the same maybe issue, we actually discussing the ministry stakeholders, especially the Ministry of Finance, on how now we can, because mind you, the 6 councils or the 6 municipal councils and 1 agency, we have just used them as a sample. So and in my country currently we have about 189 local governments. So if the Ministry of Finance is convinced of our initiative in these 6 municipalities, then we can even think of how we can roll over now to other municipalities in the country. But at the same time, we're very much thankful to the support from UNDESA because we have a book which is going to be translated in Swahili language. And I'm very much confident that most of the local government officials, especially at the lower level of the villages and districts, will be able to read, understand, and apply it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Siasa, and thank you for pointing out that there will be translations of the handbook. We're working currently on French, Spanish, Swahili, Bangla, and Nepali translations, but we're also planning to cover other UN languages and other local languages as needed. So if you, as UNDP representatives, have a request or would like to see the handbook also translated into different languages, let us know and we can try to make a case. Over to Francis now to finish up the presentations with the case of Uganda.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel, and good evening and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Biabagam Francis is my name. I've been introduced before, so I think let me skip that. Uganda has a young population that is faster growing than any other country in the world, which puts pressure on the existing assets, especially in the face of urbanization. And while the population puts pressure for new assets, local and national governments are challenged by the underperformance of the existing assets that are deteriorating due to poor maintenance, workmanship, age, mention it. As a country, we are greatly honored to have been selected among the pioneer countries on assets management project reforms brought by courtesy of UNDESA and other agencies. So the starting point with us was actually to profile assets management in local government using the tools that Linda previously explained, and I believe we really found them very, very handy. And what they revealed on the ground is that assets management was very weak, characterized by poor inventory, lack of data, lack of finance planning, forecasting, lack of policies, inadequate funding, inadequate understanding, lack of assets management plans. But at the same time, the challenge was that the politicians prefer to invest in new assets than the existing ones. And when we understood those challenges, we started our journey to put in policies in order to strategies in order to manage the assets better. We, with assistance from UNDESA and UNCDF, we trained about 24 local governments and the staff around 200 of them. Creating awareness and also equipping them with tools for assets management. And after that one, we supported the local government to develop the AMAPs, the assets management plans, for the critical and the priority assets. And I was also very happy with that even after they have created those AMAPs, UNCDF came in handy to assist those local governments to implement some of those AMAPs that they had developed. And the talking and the training and the coverage we got from the press created momentum in the local governments, but also in the central government, and created a demonstrable optimism for change, proper assets management. And this caught fire in this country. And I believe some of you who attended the last training saw a lot of really local government staff and the central government staff, all of them coming to engage in that training. And there is now a very big need that we extend these services, even to other local governments that didn't participate. At the national level, the demonstration was the country coming up with the assets management policies and assets management guidelines, which I think cabinet has now approved, and they can be rolled out to the entire service. But there has also been considerable effort to give much more money for funding assets maintenance in the local government, because the local governments dwell much more on central government for funding. And we've seen a lot of changes in the planning guidelines to accommodate assets management, and also in the assessment criteria for local governments. So we really have a lot of optimism that it is going to work greatly in this country. But also, I mean, we've seen that, yes, we still need more training, lesson moving forward. And we have also seen that, yes, where we have central government support, things become very easy, especially in Uganda, because I think we are much more ruled from top to bottom. And we've also seen, yes, it's not only enough to train and provide, we need to implement those resources, those plans that we have formulated in order to motivate the process. But much more interesting, I think we have also seen the potential of assets management has on revenue generation, because some people had innovated land management and etc, and really started getting a lot of revenues even from the sale of those assets that are down. But we also saw the need of building data, because you cannot really manage what you don't know. So data and investing in data is really very quite important. But we also saw that, yes, we need a concerted effort, a coordination, the donors, the development partners, the central government, the local government, if we are going to succeed. I was really very excited to be part of this team, and we will always be very grateful to UNDESA, UNCDF, Daniel, Linda, and colleagues. You really deserve a hand clap. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francis, and you're still part of the team. So you'll always stay part of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. I think this is really interesting. We see different, levels of implementation, different extent of challenges, but also a lot of similarities, right, between those countries. And resources is one, right? And so that's the difficult part about asset management, is that you do have to spend some resources on it, but then you will save a lot of resources in the long term. And to make that upfront investment is key, and not always politically easy. And that's why, we need partners, we need people that believe in asset management, we need support at the national level. That's why we're talking to you as well as our friends and colleagues in the field, really dealing with development challenges on a daily level. We're a little behind, but I want to spend maybe 5 minutes or so on a Q&A with our national consultants, who can really give you a lot of interesting anecdotes, information, and experiences sharing from their work. So I would suggest we put the questions in the chat function. So please, anyone, you can also just unmute yourself and ask, but if you're more comfortable typing something into the chat function, please go ahead. I'm gonna put my question in the chat function just to get started, but please add yours, and then we'll go around with all the different consultants. Anyone wants to unmute himself, herself, to say something?
Yeah, Daniel, if I can say something.
Please.
I think in my case, we really need to invest on awareness, especially at the central government level, especially at the ministry responsible for finance, because I have actually realized that even the mandate to manage all public assets is rested to the Ministry of Finance. So if we really increase the awareness of the officials at the ministry level, then it will actually trickle down to the local government level. That's what I can say.
Thank you. That was Siasa from Tanzania. It's a little hard, of course, to know who's talking, given that we all are called Diana. But this was a very good point, and we've seen the disconnect a little bit at the national level between Ministry of Finance, line ministries, ministries of local government, with some ministries very enthusiastic about it and buying into it, and then others being harder to get into the project. And of course, Ministry of Finance is always hard because these are the guys that have the resources, right? And a lot of demands posed on them. And so the way they interact with us is different, right? It's a bit more cautious, not too committal. And if we can increase the dialogue between those ministries, I think this is really helpful, not only for asset management, but for sustainable development strategies altogether. So any other questions, any other ideas, any comments from any one of you?
Yes, I think, Daniel, for the purposes of Uganda, possibly, yes, I think supporting the central government as well as the local government to develop more policies and specifically more, especially the guidelines now, because I mean, yes, local government still need to be guided on what they need to do.
Thank you so much for that, Francis. I'd love to hear from our UNDP colleagues.
Daniel,
yeah.
Okay.
You want to
Bangladesh?
Please.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. In Bangladesh, UNDP can help us, like, because currently UNDP is working with lots of municipalities and city corporations. So, like, to scale up this project, or like if you want to spread this diagnostic tool and AMAPs in lots of municipalities and city corporations, so UNDP is the, like, this is my point of view, that UNDP is the best platform which we can use, like, because, like, and even they have influence on our national government to make a policy. So I think UNDP can help us in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Bidan, and I'm sure that you know, the uptake of the handbook will be even bigger once you've translated it. Bidan is also, among many other things, he's also translating the entire 420 pages of the handbook into Bangla, and that I think will be very, very helpful for municipalities. Thank you so much, Bidan. Maybe I'll just see if there's, again, before. I think we still have to hear from Mohan, but before we do that, any other questions, comments from our UNDP colleagues? Here we have a question. I guess it's a comment that you know, you can help in implementing the AMAPs that were formulated. I don't know who made that comment, but please, if you can identify yourself in the chat, because I'm sure our consultants and team will be very enthusiastic about accepting your support and help. If you can just in the chat or by email let us know. We'll also send you all a follow-up email, of course, to maybe offer some next steps. So thank you so much for that very kind offer. Any other comments, questions? Okay, all right. So thank you so much to everyone. Before I close the session, Mohan, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, Daniel, thank you. I mean, to add on this UNDP system, let me give our example, because when in Nepal there is a big national level flagship project run by the technical support is provided by UNDP, and UNDP is going to all 753 municipalities and rural municipalities. So I mean, with our little effort with the 6 municipalities and another effort to going to 15 more municipalities, we may also reach to 753 all over the country through UNDP effort. And that we already started discussion with the project team, and they now at the beginning they have agreed to take one initiative taken by government, that is public assets management system, PAMS they call. That is a simple software, database software, converting from manual assets ledger to a small software. So that's a very good beginning, and UNDP technical assistance will be a good help to reach out to the all 753. Now we really need to go with the UNDESA and UNCDF developed tool, and that is the diagnostic tool and the AMAP itself. So if UNDP, other country offices also, pay attention on this and then help to take this to the field. That's really a great work, because I know, in Bangladesh and Nepal, in all lot of the country offices, UNDP is working with the government and with the local government. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohan. I think that we really can sense an enthusiasm on the side of our national focal points to collaborate even more with UNDP and explore ways we can complement each other's work. So I really urge our colleagues from UNDP to stay tuned, and we will reach out to you and see what the next steps could be, not only in our 4 pilot countries, but also beyond. I would hand it over now to Claire to just say a few words about next steps, and then we'll close it out. But just bear with us for another 2-3 minutes. So we'll just tell you what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you to all 4 of our national consultants. I will just very quickly breeze through some of our next steps, actually what we're currently doing alongside promoting the handbook, because we really want to build on what we've published, and to make sure that we really keep building on the scale and the impact of this work. So just very briefly on the background, in preparation for the handbook and also the OSD workshops and the MOOC that we're doing right now, we really wanted to reach out to the experts and practitioners in the areas of asset management, but also related fields like climate resilience and disaster risk reduction, to seek their inputs and their support in making sure that this product really reaches our target audiences. So we really we reached out to a lot of the names that you see here on the screen, engaged in more than 30 rounds of consultations with the regional development banks, municipal organizations like UCLG, our fellow partners in the UN system, including UNDP, as well as UNOPS. So this list is growing, and we're definitely looking forward to continuing our collaboration with these key partners. So what we're kind of in the midst of right now are these online solutions dialogues, which are regional workshops that we're giving for 3 audiences in Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean, kind of over the course of, started early February, we'll go through mid-April. You can kind of see the timeline here. Our first 2 workshops have already attracted over 800 participants, which is very encouraging for us to see, and also very exciting to engage in these workshops with individuals. As you can see here, just a couple of screenshots from our workshops we've had so far. We're engaging with them through the chat room, live polls, breakout rooms. Actually, Linda is delivering the first round of workshops on the introduction to asset management. So she goes into a lot more depth in what she just presented earlier. But yeah, these workshops, again, they're delivered for 3 regional audiences. So we really want to make them accessible to those audiences by bringing them in different languages, including Spanish, and also interpretation into French. And next week, when we have our Asia Pacific workshops with participants coming from that region, we'll also have interpretation into Bangla and Nepali. And our national consultants have been extremely hardworking and valuable in helping us prepare for these workshops and mobilizing the participants and allowing us to reach such a big number of people. In addition to the workshops, we're busy working on developing a massive open online course with UNITAR, as well as, they're not named on here, but we're also working with Columbia University to bring this offline alternative to live workshops that will basically be, it will provide a lot more of an in-depth instruction on asset management and also target a much broader audience. So it kind of turns the handbook into like a visual learning experience, make it even more hands-on and interactive than the handbook already is. And it is really just based on the handbook. So there's going to be like different modules, one per chapter. And as Daniel already mentioned earlier, we are bringing out translations of the handbook into 5 languages, including some of our local languages from pilot countries. And we're also planning translations into Arabic, Chinese, Russian, and Serbian. So really hoping to enhance the accessibility of this product. Some of the tools that you've been hearing about today, the diagnostic tool, the AMAP template, and also the AMAP writing guide are already available in multiple languages on our website. And now I'll leave it up to Daniel to give some final remarks on what's ahead.
Thank you so much, Claire. So this is the last slide, just to let you know. But it's a very crucial one because this is about our field activity. So Claire has spoken on the handbook, the translations, the workshops, the massive open online course. This is all in the virtual space, but we're all very hopeful that COVID-19 will be under control, hopefully sometime this year, and very much so next year. So what are we trying to do? And here are some ideas. So we really want to focus a little bit more on central governments and do training of trainers with Ministry of Local Government officials, with Ministry of Finance officials, on those tools, and to make sure that there's sort of a number of experts at that level that are able then to pass on the tools to others, especially local governments. That's not easy, we all know that, and we have to train a lot of experts, I think, and to really follow up, but this is probably a good strategy. We do believe it's a good strategy to increase the sustainability and scale of the project. We also like to expand our training to other target countries, given the fact that we will have material now and instructors in different languages as well. We will continue in the field to work with local governments to implement AMAPs, those that are doing it already and others that will decide to do it. Again, very crucial to work with you on this, really. UNDESA is not really in the field. We have our consultants in the field, but we really rely on this, the presence of our experts in the field and see how we can support you with our training on asset management in your existing work. We're also thinking about doing workshops on national policy development. We've heard from France of how critical it is to have a national policy in place. In Uganda, it has been in the development for some time now, but it's finally been approved. I learned from Francis also at the cabinet level, which is great news. I know this was sort of the last step, and it was good to hear from him now that it's finally done. But other countries are not as far along, and they are often, still trying to figure out what it means to have an asset management policy. And often it starts with this idea of asking a very basic questions. What assets do we have at the national and at the local level, which is a very big question to ask, but this is often the motivation to get things going. Right. I think the first question that Uganda asked itself was, how much are these assets worth? What do we have? And how can we go about collecting that information? That answer will never be fully comprehensively, there, but it is a very good motivation to get things started. And then finally, really another call to really, let us know how we can help you in your work, and how more training on asset management can feed into the existing initiatives. So we're really exploring strategic partnerships with the UN system. You already heard that UNCDF, UNOPS have been involved. UNDP through Diana's initiative, very much involved as well, but we like to scale it up. So next steps would be really to send you a recording of this. Please feel free to look at it again, share it with colleagues that couldn't make it today, and then keep you informed about the project and the next activities if you agree. So we'll send you a follow-up email. We'll send you the next steps. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us, to engage with us. I know you're all very busy and it's very late in some of those countries that joined us. So that's it from our side. I would say a big shout out to Diana for putting this together. Thank you to Claire for handling it so wisely. Thank you to Linda for introducing the handbook, and of course also to our national consultants, and finally to all of you. Okay. Goodbye, good night, good morning.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye from
bye.
Bye-bye from Maiduguri.
Bye-bye.